Thanks so much to the organizers of the event for putting this together. It's very exciting to speak to you today. I'm going to talk about change in cities and photography, rephotography. It's a strange word, but it's the act of going back and making contemporary images from the same place, same time of day, same time of year. I'm going to talk to you about my approach and why I did this project, and I think we'll, quickly understand the relationship to our discussion today. But I'm going to really more specifically talk about my project. Berenice Abbott photographed New York in the 1930s, documenting Manhattan and the surrounding boroughs. She took over 300 pictures that would document New York, showing how the city was changing over time. She had lived in New York in the teens, in the 19-teens. She moved to Paris in the 20s, and then moved back to New York in around 1930. Actually, she moved back to New York, but she came to visit, saw how much the city was changing from when she had been here previously, and decided, I'm going to stay in New York, and I'm going to document the city. So many things were changing, small areas that she would go visit when she was scouting her project. They would, small buildings would see, she'd go back for a second time to go photograph them, and she'd see that they were razed, that they had been, completely destroyed. So this is just a few pictures from her project of 300 pictures. Starting in 1997, I went back to these same locations using the same large format 8x10 Century Universal camera, documenting New York to show the change, that show the difference between these times and to show the city changing over 65 years. In 1994, before I got started, I came across, I photographed an alum, Ellen Carey, of UB in New York City. She's a photographer, teaches in Hartford School of Art, and she had been encouraging me to do something outside of the commercial work that I did every day. I photographed people for Newsweek, Business Week, many different magazines. And I very much wanted to document New York City somehow, but I couldn't quite figure out how to get started. I got my degree here. I didn't take formal art classes, and I was kind of at a loss how to get started. I had never done iterations, series of pictures. And she challenged me to somehow find a body of work. These are pictures by Alexander Rodchenko. To find a body of work that a Russian photographer from the early part of the last century, she said, find a body of work that speaks to you, someone's work who she would challenge her students to say, find out everything you can about a photographer's work, and it's your challenge to somehow take that work beyond their lives and into our own. And I was so connected to this work, and his graphic design work, his painting, just very much embodied this incredible spirit. And he was connected to this new 35mm camera. I mean, today this is one of the most mundane devices in some ways. But at the time, it was this new device that you could now all of a sudden look up from below and down from above. Cameras previous to this were pretty much on tripods. You literally were locked in place. And so I just couldn't see how you could take these ideas forward to the end of the 20th century in New York City. So this idea of reference I had kind of like lost, even though we would have arguments about this. But the idea of working from another body of work was Ellen's point. And I just kept on thinking about these ideas as that you needed to be original, that you wanted to somehow find, take all the influences in that you have on a day-to-day basis, and then somehow let that come out rather than working directly directly from another body of work. So this picture is Berenice Abbott's Broadway near Broome Street. Abbott's picture is taken in 1935. I happened to be at a pre-auction at Christie's, and there's works by Avedon, Weegee, every photographer from the last century that are on viewing and on sale. And this picture really just attached me. I just couldn't take my eyes off of it. It was the view outside of my Soho loft. This is Broome Street going towards west, and there was a cobblestone street. It was a two-way street, which here it's a one-way street. The OK Hardware Store, which is a vegetarian dairy restaurant. This was the Bank of Sicily Trust, which is a shoe store. All these things told me so much about this neighborhood that I thought I was religiously familiar with. And it started to gel, and I started to realize that if I started to go back to these locations and look into the Changing New York project, I could perhaps combine all of my interests in architecture, architectural history, city planning. It was a way that just somehow gelled all these ideas that were so close to me and that I could somehow tell the story through photography. And it was also kind of embracing those ideas that Ellen, in a sense, had pushed me towards, and realized that there was a real good story here to tell people. So this is the Customs House statues with New York Produce Exchange. That's the Produce Exchange beyond. And going there, this was one of the first locations that I had scouted for the project. And it was almost like somebody had taken a curtain and just pulled it by. And again, scouting it, trying to just figure out if this is a good idea. You're not quite sure, but the kind of thing that cemented it for me, to be able to show the human change, to show what we do to our environment, how cities change, the social change, the environmental change, in a sense, how we change these places that we live in. This is Abbotts on the left. This is Henry Street, taken in 1935, and my picture taken in 1998. This is one of the early pictures that I had done on the project. It was, I had to go there about 5 or 6 times in order to finally make this picture. It doesn't seem all that complicated, but you're working with, or I'm working with, an 8x10 camera, so the film is about this size. And in order to complete this picture, there's the lenses that I used. I had a 9.5 and a 12-inch lens. We measure lenses in millimeters now. They measured in inches at those times. So I would try these lenses, and they just weren't long enough. There wasn't enough magnification. And it didn't quite gel with I spoke to historians. Bonnie Yokelson, who's a historian on Berenice Abbott, has written wonderful books on her work. And I would talk to Bonnie and say, so, can you help me through here, figure out, how to do this? Any details about what Abbott did in order to do her project? And she would say, well, I read somewhere that she removed something from the lens. And so I initially knew that, these lenses must have been convertible lenses. So I'm using the same Gertz Dagor lenses that Abbott used. Strangely enough, when they were originally marketed, they were marketed as convertible lenses. Convertible lenses meaning to you guys that if you take off one element of the camera, you now have changed the magnification and basically created a second lens. So basically, in the lenses I had the results, the ability to make the picture. So through experimentation, I finally found out with a 14-inch lens, you remove the front element, and you're able to take the exact same picture almost instantaneously. So it was just a really great feeling of discovery. This picture is Abbott's West Street, Vista from West Street. It's a picture that I had never thought that I would do for the project. If you went down there in the late the last part of the century, you would basically see the World Trade Center completely filling the view. There would be nothing here. These were raised for the World Trade Center in the 1970s. And then the background, nothing would be seen. So after the towers were destroyed in 2001, I decided, let's see if we can do this. And I went back. I happened to have a job, a commercial job, at the World Financial Center, which really faces the West Side Highway there. And they were able to help me find an entrance to the city. And there was so much bureaucracy down there. And you just never thought that you would be able to get access. And the West Side Highway was just reopening. They had just repaved it. They would literally just had put the double yellow lines back on the road, which is basically right where I had to stand in order to take the picture. And that area here is basically, that's the open part of the plot there. And I was really kind of concerned that somebody was going to shoo me off. People did not like, even at that time, this was in like March of 2002, people still didn't like people taking photographs down there. So this is Abbotts Manhattan 1 from Pier 11, her picture taken in 1936, mine in 1998. Again, early on in the project, going to do this, Abbott's picture is this is one of the more iconic skylines of New York. And I was very excited to take the picture and, of course, very disappointed by the result of my picture. But it's what really started to compel me. You're standing on this, it's a cold February day. I'm waiting for the little bits of light that will help tell the difference so you can barely notice. But the light it's the same time of year. So, I would wait hours sometimes for shadows to move, for things to come into place. I'm taking them at the same time of year. Really, the quality of light often is what would help tell the story. And you start to realize how important it would be to have these pictures seen side by side, and how that would tell the story of how we change our environments. And hopefully, by looking at sometimes the horror of the result, that we can gain something from it. And part of the reason that there's these tall buildings here is the South Street Seaport, which was renovated in the late 60s, early 70s. Air rights were kind of transferred to other buildings, and so they had the ability to put up this whole other screen of buildings out one more level on the island. This was, we moved back just up the island there on the east side. These are floating oyster barges. This is Abbott's oyster houses, taken in 1937. My picture in 2002, towards the end of the project. These are actually oyster shells. This is just the result. That's the end of the day's work there. Let's see. And so these barges would go out into the Long Island Sound and collect oysters for consumption. One of the more iconic pictures from the project is Blossom Restaurant, Abbott's picture taken in 1935, my picture in 1998. It's a really great ability to see how, the culture, all these foods and prices, and in a sense, still some level of consumption. This is the Everywhere Company, and I wanted to have the proprietor come out, but he was not very interested in coming out to satisfy the whims of a photographer. This is a gentleman that happened to be watching me set up, and I asked him to come back and stand in the picture. There were quite a few pictures. I did 114 rephotographs. Abbott did over 300 pictures for the project. There were quite a few that were taken outside of buildings, or from windows, on roofs. And these were the more challenging locations, as you could imagine, in order to figure out how high up is she. I mean, this building has obviously hundreds of windows. It's hard to show you exactly here, but when these perspectives turn horizontal, that'll basically tell you the height that she's at. So probably right about here would be, if you counted up the windows, which is what I had to do, you would divine the floor that she's standing on. Of course, that's a different building that she is on. The heights have different heights, so you have to make some assumptions. Then you stand out on the street, you look at the building, and these all have setbacks. And so I kind of guessed it's probably on a setback rather than necessarily just out some window. So I guessed correctly. Luckily, I asked for a maintenance person was nice enough to let us out in the building, took us up in the building, walked us into somebody's office, opened the window, and left us out there for several hours. There's 2 pictures taken on this roof that day, one to the south and one to the north. And it was only about 5 or 7 minutes apart. I mean, Abbott, just even though it's a complicated camera, she would just take a picture on one side, walk to the other, take the other picture. Not as easy when you're rephotographing. This is the George Washington Bridge on the top of Manhattan, obviously on the west side. Abbott's picture in 1937, mine in 1998. So I'm walking around in the woods up there. Who would imagine there's woods in this part of Manhattan? But you're trying to figure out where to stand, and I've finally realized that this tree has some pretty interesting shapes on it. And I realized that this branch is doing this, and then you realize that this branch is doing this. And you realize, it's funny, it's dead in this picture. It's still standing there, but it hasn't fallen over yet. And so that's what helped me divine the location. of course, looking at the shapes and to line things up, you could hardly see the bridge. It was a pretty strange picture. And this, one of the oddest pictures from the project, this is on Staten Island, this is the Garibaldi Memorial. It remembers Giuseppe Garibaldi that convalesced in this home on Staten Island in the 1850s after the Peloponnesian Wars. An Italian society decided to memorialize this house, and so they built this grand structure. If you can almost barely see that the house is still underneath this structure, and it's literally piercing the porch of the house that it protects. So it's one of those pictures that you just had to do. It was a little bit of a challenge getting to Staten Island. I didn't have a car. And it was a really kind of a fun shoot. And it's literally at the same time of day. You can see the shadow is the same. But those are the kind of details that I would interested in following. So I'm going to quickly show you, running a little bit long, I'll quickly show you some projects that inspired me in the project. This is John Fowles' work, who did Arcadia Revisited. I saw this as a student in 1986 as he was involved doing this project. He had gone back in the Niagara Gorge, and he won a commission in order to make contemporary pictures that were inspired by these Amos W. Sangster drawings that were done 100 years previous. And they're just really, seeing this as a student, I had to kind of like look back and try to understand, what were these things? Why would rephotography, why would be going back to, another location seem like a good idea? And I'm going to kind of breeze through, as I've gone a little bit long here. The next one is Milton Rogovan, another local photographer who I had seen his work as a student here. And Milton and his wife Anne went back. They photographed people in their Lower West Side neighborhood. They went back 7 or 8 years later. They went back 7 or 8 years later again and photographed these people. And so they stayed in touch. It was their neighborhood. I almost feel like these people are part of my family when I see these pictures. This is, to me, one of the most touching. A gentleman with his child, the child who knows, what's happened to the father, and then the child with his son. And, these ideas of telling pictures over time can, we can digest them in so many different ways. And then this last project, Second View, created by Mark Klett, is the Rephotographic Survey. They went back to the places of Timothy O'Sullivan and William Henry Jackson, who had photographed the American West for the US Geological Survey 100 years previous. And they went back to these locations, trying to divine locations, trying to find these same places. This is a dam that now blocks a river, houses on these beautiful buttes. And then they were so wonderful to actually go back a third time. So, and the idea of continuing this discussion, that it doesn't end. Mark has this wonderful quote in the beginning of his book thinking about that perhaps they were doing the second picture in a 1,000-year flipbook of the American landscape. And so he is taking it seriously and literally going back again and again. So I'm going to briefly show you some pictures that are my pictures that are the idea of the project. Unfortunately, I'm not still in New York City, but the idea was to continue taking pictures in the same voice of Abbott, to take pictures in the same style, the same energy, remembering New York for the future. And I want to just read you a brief quote from the end of my book. So at the end of the book, and again, talking about change in time, so a single photograph gives the illusion that time stops. A rephotograph lifts that illusion. In this tangling of the old and the new, the different and the same, lies the truth that Abbott understood well. All is flux, change is the only permanence. I'm neither mystical nor grandiose enough to think that Abbott anticipated my arrival on the scene, although I do believe that her work may fairly be read as an invitation to do what I have done here. I hope that our paired works constitute a fresh invitation, not only for rephotographers for the future, but to anyone interested in urban life. Every change in our built environment reflects countless decisions. The future of our cities depends in great on understanding how past decisions become our future. Thank you.